Life has a strange way of changing direction when we least expect it. One moment, everything feels predictable, comfortable, and familiar. The next moment, something small appears, a message, an opportunity, or even a simple conversation, and suddenly the path ahead begins to look completely different. For Armin, life had always been quiet and steady. He lived in a peaceful town surrounded by wide green fields and old trees that had stood there for generations. The town was not famous, and very few travelers ever stopped there. But the people who lived in it felt a strong connection to the place. It was the kind of town where neighbors greeted each other every morning, and where everyone seemed to know everyone else's story. Armin had grown up there and never really imagined leaving. His life revolved around a small bookstore on the corner of the main street. The shop belonged to an elderly man named Mr. Karim, who had trusted Armin to manage the place for several years. The bookstore smelled of old paper and wood, and sunlight streamed through the large windows every afternoon. To many people, it was just a small shop, but to Armin, it was a world filled with endless possibilities. Each book on the shelf carried a story from somewhere else in the world. Some spoke of distant cities with towering buildings. Others told tales of travelers crossing oceans and mountains in search of something greater. Armin loved those stories because they allowed him to imagine a life beyond the borders of his quiet town. Yet imagination was the closest he had ever come to leaving. Every day followed the same rhythm. Armin opened the bookstore in the morning, greeted regular customers, helped children choose storybooks, and recommended novels to curious readers. In the evening, he would close the shop and walk slowly home through the quiet streets. It was a peaceful life, but deep inside, there was a small voice that sometimes wondered whether something bigger was waiting for him somewhere beyond the horizon. For years, that voice stayed quiet, until one morning changed everything. It began with a letter. Armin found it waiting on the floor, just inside the bookstore door. At first glance, it looked like any other envelope, but when he noticed the name of a sender printed at the top, his heart skipped a beat. The letter came from a large publishing company in a major city. Months earlier, Armin had written a short story during a sleepless night. He had always enjoyed writing, but it was something he kept private. That night he had simply poured his thoughts onto paper, creating a story about courage, change, and the mysterious way life guides people toward their destiny. On a sudden impulse, he had mailed the story to the publishing company. After that, he had completely forgotten about it. Now the letter was in his hands. Armin slowly opened the envelope and began to read. As his eyes moved across the words, a mixture of disbelief and excitement filled his mind. The company had read his story, and they loved it. They believed he had real potential as a writer and wanted to meet him in person to discuss an opportunity to work with them. But there was one important detail. They asked him to visit within the next 7 days. 7 days. The number echoed through Armin's thoughts like a quiet countdown. He sat down in the wooden chair behind the counter, staring at the letter as if it might disappear if he looked away. For years, life had felt predictable. Now suddenly everything felt uncertain. If he accepted the invitation, he would have to travel to the city for the first time in his life. It meant stepping away from the bookstore, leaving behind the routine that had shaped his days. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. All morning, Armin tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept returning to the same question. Should he go? By the afternoon, he decided he needed fresh air. He closed the shop early and walked toward the town park, a quiet place where tall trees created long shadows over the grass. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. Armin sat on a wooden bench,